Commander Sarah Chen stood in the observation deck of Luna Command, her eyes fixed on the holographic display that floated before her. 12 points of light moved steadily through the darkness of space, each one representing a ship from beyond the solar system. They were beautiful, these alien vessels. The computer had tried to describe their shape, but words like crystalline and organic seemed inadequate. They shimmered and changed as they moved, as if they were made of liquid light frozen into impossible geometries. "They're broadcasting again," said Lieutenant Marcus Webb from his station. His fingers danced across the controls, and suddenly, the observation deck filled with sound. It was music, or something like music. Then came words in English, then Mandarin, then Arabic, then languages Sarah had never heard before. 17 different ways to say the same thing. "We come in peace. We seek friendship with Earth." Sarah felt her heart beating fast. This was it. After centuries of wondering if humanity was alone in the universe, after decades of searching the stars with increasingly powerful telescopes, after years of preparing protocols and procedures for this exact moment, it was finally happening. The Zolthran Imperium, they called themselves. Their message had arrived 3 months ago, asking permission to enter human space and establish diplomatic relations. Dr. Kwame Osei stood beside her, tears streaming down his weathered face. The old xenolinguist had spent 40 years preparing for this moment, learning theoretical frameworks for alien communication, developing translation algorithms, writing papers that most people thought were pure fantasy. Now his fantasy was real and moving toward them at 0.3 light speed. "They're past Mars orbit now," Webb reported. "Trajectory is stable. They'll reach the meeting coordinates in 17 minutes. Sarah nodded. The meeting coordinates were carefully chosen, far enough from Earth to be safe, but close enough that the delegation could reach them within hours. 3 human ships waited there: the diplomatic vessel Harmony, the science ship Discovery, and the defense cruiser Vigilant. Just in case, Sarah would lead the human delegation aboard Harmony, along with Dr. Osei and representatives from every major Earth government. "All teams, this is Chen," she said into her comm. "Final equipment check. We launch in 10 minutes. Around her, the observation deck buzzed with activity. Technicians checked and rechecked their instruments. Diplomats practiced their greeting speeches for the 100th time. Military officers watched the incoming fleet with suspicious eyes, their hands never far from their weapon controls. Sarah understood their caution. Humanity had learned hard lessons about trust during its own history. But these were not humans. These were Zolthran, beings from a star called Kelthera Prime, nearly 40 light-years from Earth. Their messages had been nothing but friendly. Their technology was clearly advanced beyond anything humanity possessed, yet they had stopped at the edge of the solar system and asked permission before entering. That showed respect. That showed civilization. "Commander, we're picking up something strange," Webb said, his voice suddenly uncertain. Sarah turned to him. "What kind of strange?" "I'm not sure. There's a fluctuation in the sensor readings around the Zolthran fleet. Nothing major, just odd. Like a ripple in space." Dr. Osei moved closer to Webb's station, peering at the data. "Could it be their propulsion system? We don't understand their technology yet." "Maybe," Webb said, but he didn't sound convinced. Sarah watched the 12 points of light. They continued their steady approach, now passing through the asteroid belt. So close, so very close to the meeting point. In 16 minutes, humanity would meet another intelligent species face to face for the first time in its history. She thought about all the generations who had dreamed of this moment. All the science fiction writers and philosophers and scientists who had imagined first contact. None of them had imagined it quite like this, with humanity reasonably advanced, reasonably prepared, reasonably confident. "Commander," Webb said again, and this time his voice held real alarm. "The fluctuation is increasing. I'm reading massive gravitational distortions around the fleet." Sarah's military instincts kicked in immediately. "All stations, alert status. Track those ships closely. Harmony, Vigilant, Discovery. Prepare for possible evasive action." "Could it be a weapon?" someone asked. "Unknown," Sarah said. "Dr. Osei, any thoughts?" The old man shook his head, his earlier joy replaced by confusion. "This doesn't match any of their documented technology, unless they're revealing something new." The 12 points of light continued forward. 14 minutes to the meeting coordinates. The gravitational readings spiked higher. Sarah could see the confusion spreading through Luna Command as more people noticed the anomaly. "Try to contact them," Sarah ordered. "Ask if they need assistance." Webb sent the message and they waited. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. 15. Then a response came back, still in that calm, friendly tone. "We are well. Looking forward to meeting you." But the sensors told a different story. The gravitational distortions were now off the charts, centered precisely around each Zolthran ship. It was as if space itself was bending around them, warping and twisting in ways that made Sarah's head hurt when she tried to visualize it. 13 minutes, Webb reported. Sarah grabbed her comm. "All ships maintain position but stay alert. Something is wrong here." She watched the display with growing unease. The Zolthran ships were still broadcasting their peaceful messages, still moving forward in perfect formation, still on course for the meeting point. But those readings, those impossible readings that suggested space itself was attacking them. 12 minutes, Webb said, and then it happened. One moment, 12 crystalline ships were there, brilliant points of light representing the hopes of two civilizations. The next moment they were gone, simply gone. The display showed empty space where a fleet had existed seconds before. No explosion, no debris, no energy signature, no distress call, just nothing. The observation deck fell silent. Everyone stared at the holographic display, waiting for the ships to reappear, waiting for some explanation, waiting for anything. But there was only empty space and the distant stars. "Webb?" Sarah's voice sounded strange in her own ears. "Confirm." The lieutenant worked his controls frantically, his face pale. "Confirmed, Commander. All 12 Zolthran vessels have vanished from all sensors. Visual tracking shows nothing. Gravitational detectors show nothing. Electromagnetic spectrum shows nothing. They're just gone." Dr. Ose made a sound like a wounded animal. No, this can't be." Sarah forced herself to think clearly. "Scan for debris. Scan for any energy signatures. Check the meeting coordinates." Maybe they jumped ahead. But even as she gave the orders, she knew what they would find. Nothing. The Zolthran Imperium had entered Earth's space, broadcasting peace and friendship in 17 languages, and then they had vanished without a trace, as if they had never existed at all. "All stations. This is Commander Chen," she said, her voice steady despite the ice in her stomach. "Implement emergency protocol Zenus. I want every sensor we have focused on that area of space. I want explanations. I want theories. I want answers. And I want them now." She stared at the empty space on the display where first contact should have happened, where history should have been made. Instead, there was only darkness and silence and a mystery that threatened to shatter humanity's hopes of joining the galactic community. Somewhere out there, 12 ships full of alien diplomats had disappeared, and Sarah Chen had no idea why. 3 weeks had passed since the Zolthran fleet vanished, and Sarah Chen had barely slept. She stood now in the command center of the research vessel Newton, watching yet another scan of the disappearance zone. The area of space where 12 alien ships had simply ceased to exist looked completely normal. Every test showed nothing unusual. No radiation, no spatial anomalies, no gravitational distortions. It was as if the universe itself had decided to play a cruel joke on humanity. "Commander, we have another contact," Webb said from his station. His voice carried a weight that hadn't been there before. 3 weeks of failure had changed everyone. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. "Another one?" "Yes, ma'am. 6 ships this time. They're identifying themselves as the Heptari Confederation. They're responding to the Zolthran distress beacon." "What distress beacon?" Sarah asked. "The Zolthran never sent one." "Apparently they did, ma'am, automatically, before they vanished. It just took 3 weeks for the signal to reach the nearest Heptari outpost." Sarah closed her eyes briefly. More aliens, more ships approaching Earth. And humanity still had no idea what had happened to the first ones. "What are they saying?" "They want to know where the Zolthran are. They're asking permission to search for them." "Tell them to stay at the system edge," Sarah ordered. "Tell them it's not safe." But the Heptari ships continued forward. Their vessels looked different from the Zolthran's crystalline beauty. These were solid metallic, covered in what looked like armor plating. Warships, Sarah realized. They weren't taking chances. "They're saying they understand our warning, but they have to try," Webb reported. "They're saying the Zolthran are their allies. They won't abandon them. Sarah watched the 6 new points of light move through the solar system. She had hoped, desperately hoped, that whatever happened to the Zolthran was a unique event, a terrible accident, a one-time malfunction of some unknown technology. But something deep in her gut told her this was going to end badly. The Heptari ships moved past Mars, past the asteroid belt. They entered the zone where the Zolthran had vanished, moving cautiously, their sensors undoubtedly scanning everything. For a moment, Sarah allowed herself to hope. Maybe it was just the Zolthran. Maybe their technology had malfunctioned. Maybe these new ships would be fine. Then the Heptari fleet disappeared. All 6 ships. Gone in an instant, just like before. Dr. Osei sat down heavily in his chair, looking older than Sarah had ever seen him. Dear God, it's happening again. Over the next 2 weeks, 17 more ships vanished. They came from 5 different alien species, all responding to news about the Zolthran disappearance, all determined to find their missing neighbors. The Korvath sent 3 ships. The Meridian Union sent 5. The Slithera sent 4. The Vreen sent 3. The Talaxian Empire sent 2. All of them vanished in the same area of space, and humanity could only watch helplessly. But then Lieutenant Marcus Webb noticed something. He had been running the numbers obsessively, plotting the disappearances on 3-dimensional charts, looking for any pattern at all. And finally he found one. "Commander, look at this," he said, projecting his analysis onto the main display. "All the disappearances happen in a spherical zone, centered on the sun. The outer edge is exactly 2.4 astronomical units from the sun." Sarah studied the display. "But that's not the same distance from Earth." "Exactly. It's measured from the sun, not from Earth, and look at this." He added another layer to the display. "Human ships have passed through this zone 47 times since the first disappearance. Nothing happened to any of them. Only alien ships vanished," Dr. Osei said slowly. "Only ships that aren't human. And only when they're approaching Earth," Webb added. "We found records of 3 Zolthran ships that passed through the solar system 2 years ago, before we had direct contact. They went around the system at a distance and continued on. Nothing happened to them. But all these ships, the ones that vanished, they were all coming specifically to Earth." Sarah felt cold. "You're saying something is targeting alien ships that try to reach Earth? Something that can tell the difference between human technology and alien technology?" "That's exactly what I'm saying," Webb replied. The implications were staggering. Was it a weapon? A defense system? But if so, who built it? Humanity certainly hadn't. And if not humanity, then who? 2 days later, they got a partial answer. A long-range patrol found one of the vanished ships. It was a Heptari cruiser, drifting powerless in space nearly 8 light-years from Earth. The ship appeared undamaged, but completely dead. No power, no life support, no signs of life. Sarah led the rescue team personally. They boarded the Heptari cruiser through the main airlock, their suit lights cutting through the darkness. The ship's interior was frozen. The air turned to frost on every surface. They found the crew at their stations, frozen solid, their faces locked in expressions of terror, all except one. In what looked like the captain's quarters, they found a single Heptari still alive, barely. The alien was massive, nearly 8 feet tall, covered in thick fur that had probably saved its life. It was curled in a corner, wearing an emergency survival suit that had kept it breathing. "Get the medical team," Sarah ordered. "Now." They transported the Heptari survivor back to the Newton, where human doctors worked frantically alongside the ship's computer to keep the alien alive. The Heptari's biology was different enough from human that half of what they tried didn't work, but they managed to stabilize it. When the Heptari regained consciousness, Dr. Osei was there with a translation device. The alien's first words, translated by the computer, were, "The silence." "It came for us. What silence?" Osei asked gently. "Can you tell us what happened?" The Heptari's breathing was labored. Its huge eyes, each one the size of Sarah's fist, fixed on them with clear intelligence. "We entered your star system. We were looking for the Zolthran, then the silence. It wasn't sound. It wasn't anything physical. It was like the universe itself reached out and grabbed our ship. Everything stopped working. All our systems failed at once. And then we were somewhere else, light years away. My crew froze before I could save them." "What grabbed you?" Sarah asked. "Did you see anything?" "No, nothing, just the feeling of being judged. Like something very old and very powerful looked at us and found us wanting. The silence decided we should not be there, and so we were not there anymore. It was that simple. But why? Webb asked. Why wouldn't it want you near Earth? The Heptary's eyes closed. Earth is protected. We should never have come. None of us should have come. Tell the others. Tell them to stay away from Earth. Tell them. The alien's words cut off. Its breathing became irregular. The medical monitors began to shriek alarms. The human doctors worked desperately, but there was nothing they could do. The Heptari had held on long enough to deliver its warning, and now its massive body went still. In the silence that followed, Sarah looked at the faces of her crew. They were all thinking the same thing. Something was protecting Earth. Something powerful enough to pluck ships out of space and throw them light years away. Something that had been there long enough that the Heptari captain called it old. Something that had decided humanity should be left alone. But humanity had never asked for this protection. They hadn't built any defense system. They didn't even know it existed until now, which meant someone else had put it there. Someone else had decided that Earth needed defending. The question was who, and more importantly, why? Dr. Elena Vasquez had always hated the cold. She had grown up in Madrid, where winter meant putting on a light jacket. Now she stood on the ice of Antarctica, watching as massive drilling equipment carved through 3 miles of frozen water, and she couldn't remember what warmth felt like. The seismic activity had started 6 weeks ago, right when the first alien ships vanished. At first, nobody connected the two events. Earthquakes happened. Antarctica had them occasionally. But then the sensors picked up something strange under the ice, something that was radiating the same kind of energy signature as the disappearances. Something that had been silent for millions of years was suddenly awake. We're through the final layer, said Dr. James Park, the team's geologist. His voice crackled over the radio. Elena, you need to see this. Elena climbed into the elevator cage that would lower her down the shaft. The descent took 20 minutes, passing through layers of ice that recorded Earth's climate history like pages in a book. At the bottom, she stepped into a cavern that shouldn't exist. The walls were smooth, perfectly curved, as if someone had carved out a sphere from the rock and ice. In the center of the cavern floated an object that made Elena's breath catch in her throat. It was a perfect sphere, about 50 feet in diameter, made of a material that seemed to shift between solid and liquid. Its surface rippled with colors that had no names, and it hummed with a sound that Elena felt in her bones rather than heard with her ears. What is it? Park asked, his scientific curiosity overcoming his fear. I have no idea, Elena replied, but I think we just found out what's been making the alien ships disappear. The research team set up equipment around the sphere. They scanned it with every instrument available. The object was old, incredibly old. Carbon dating of the surrounding rock suggested it had been placed here 65 million years ago, give or take a few million years. Right around the time the dinosaurs died out. This can't be human, Park said, stating the obvious. Humans didn't exist 65 million years ago. Nothing even close to humans existed. No, Elena agreed. This is alien. Someone came to Earth a very long time ago and left this thing here. The question is why? They spent 3 days studying the sphere before they figured out how to interact with it. It responded to touch, but only to human touch. When Elena placed her hand against its surface, the sphere's humming changed pitch, and suddenly the cavern filled with light. Holographic images appeared in the air around them. At first, Elena thought they were just random patterns. Then she realized she was looking at star charts. Maps of the galaxy, with hundreds of systems marked in different colors. And there, highlighted in bright blue, was Sol, Earth's sun. It's a map, she whispered. It's showing us something. The image changed. Now they were looking at Earth, but not the Earth Elena knew. This was Earth as it had been millions of years ago, when dinosaurs ruled and the continents were arranged differently. Then figures appeared in the hologram. Aliens. They were tall and thin, with too many joints in their limbs, and their heads were smooth and featureless except for what might have been eyes. The architects, said a voice. It came from everywhere and nowhere, speaking in perfect English. That is what we called ourselves. We who built and planned and shaped. Elena and her team stood frozen as the hologram continued. They watched as the architects visited Earth, studied its primitive life, and made a decision. They showed images of other worlds, dozens of them, all marked on that same star chart. Worlds where life was developing. Worlds with potential. We found you, the voice continued. We found many species with the spark of intelligence, species that might one day reach the stars, but we learned, through painful experience, that contact too early destroys potential. We found civilizations that we helped, that we guided, that we tried to uplift, and we watched them fail. They became dependent on us. They never developed their own strength, their own wisdom, their own path. The hologram showed scenes of these failures, alien civilizations that had grown comfortable with the architect's help, only to collapse when that help was withdrawn. Species that had stopped innovating, stopped striving, stopped growing because someone else was always there to solve their problems. We realized our mistake, the voice said, so we changed our approach. We found worlds where intelligence was emerging and we protected them. We built guardians. We created systems that would ensure each species developed alone without interference until they were ready. The hologram focused on Earth again. The architects placed the sphere deep under the ice of what would one day be Antarctica. They programmed it with specific instructions. It would remain dormant until the day that Earth's dominant species developed space travel. Then it would activate. The Guardian's purpose is simple, the voice explained. It prevents any alien civilization from making contact with Earth until humans reach the stars on their own. It removes any ship that attempts to approach. It protects humanity's right to develop naturally, to make their own mistakes, to learn their own lessons. This is our gift to you. Isolation until you are ready. Elena felt anger rising in her chest. You call it a gift? You're keeping us prisoner. You're making decisions for us. The hologram shifted and now a single architect appeared before them. It looked almost solid, almost real, though Elena knew it was just a recording left behind millions of years ago. I am Keeper of Distant Gardens, the figure said. I led the team that placed this guardian. If you are watching this, then you have found us, which means you have developed enough to understand. So I will tell you the full truth. We debated this decision for generations. Some of us believed that isolation was a form of imprisonment, as you suggest. Others believed that premature contact was a form of murder, killing a species by preventing them from reaching their full potential. The Keeper of Distant Gardens moved, its two long limbs gesturing at the images surrounding it. We studied thousands of civilizations. We found that species which developed alone, which had to solve all their own problems, which had to create all their own technology, were stronger, more innovative, more likely to survive the dangers of a hostile galaxy. Species that received help too early became weak. They relied on others. They never learned to stand on their own. Park spoke up. So you decided for us. You decided that we needed to be alone. Yes, the Keeper said. We decided. And perhaps that was wrong. Perhaps any decision made on behalf of another species is inherently wrong. But we believed the alternative was worse. We believed that letting the galaxy rush in, letting more advanced species contact you before you were ready, would destroy you. So we chose isolation. We chose to protect you. We chose to give you time. Elena looked at the sphere, at the device that had been defending Earth for 65 million years. How long will it stay active? The Guardian activates when your species develops space travel capability. It remains active until you choose to deactivate it. Or until it fails. Our technology was designed to last, but nothing lasts forever. The Guardian is already degrading. In approximately 5 of your years, it will cease to function entirely. 5 years. 5 years before the defense system failed on its own, and the galaxy came pouring in whether humanity was ready or not. Why are you telling us this? Elena asked. Why give us the choice to deactivate it? The Keeper of Distant Gardens tilted its head in what might have been a gesture of respect. Because you are asking the right questions. Because you have found us, which means you are clever enough to understand. Because any species that can locate and access this chamber has earned the right to decide their own fate. We gave you isolation to protect you, but we will not force it upon you against your will. The choice must be yours. The hologram began to fade. We are long dead now, the Keeper said. Our civilization fell to the very dangers we tried to protect you from. But our last gift remains. Use it or destroy it. The decision is yours, children of Earth. We hope we chose wisely. We hope you choose wisely as well. The light vanished, leaving Elena and her team standing in the darkness with only their helmet lights to push back the shadows. Around them, the sphere continued to hum, continuing its 65 million year mission to defend Earth from contact it deemed premature. Elena thought about the alien ships that had vanished. The Zolthran diplomats, The Heptari warriors, all those beings who had simply wanted to meet humanity, thrown light years away by an ancient defense system built by a species that was dust before humans learned to make fire. "We need to report this," Park said quietly. "We need to tell everyone." "Yes," Elena agreed. But as she looked at the sphere, she wondered what humanity would do with this knowledge. Would they choose isolation, hiding behind the architect's protection until it failed? Or would they choose contact, deactivating the Guardian and facing the galaxy on their own terms? Either way, the choice would change everything. The age of innocence was over. Humanity now knew it was not alone, and that someone had been deciding its fate for millions of years. What they would do with that knowledge, Elena couldn't guess. But she knew one thing for certain. The galaxy was waiting, and in 5 years or less the barrier would fall. Ready or not, humanity's time of isolation was coming to an end. The United Earth Council chambers had never been so crowded. Representatives from every nation on Earth sat in the circular hall, their faces projected on screens for those who couldn't attend in person. Above them, more screens showed the sphere in Antarctica, still humming with its ancient purpose. And outside the solar system, at the very edge where the Guardian's influence ended, an alien fleet waited. Sarah Chen stood at the center of the chamber, feeling the weight of every eye upon her. She had been asked to present the situation, to explain humanity's impossible choice to the people who would decide Earth's fate. "The facts are simple," she began. "The Guardian system built by the architects has been protecting Earth for 65 million years. It removes any alien vessel that attempts to approach our planet. We now have the ability to deactivate it. The question before us is, should we?" Ambassador Liu Zheng, representative of the Pan-Asian Coalition, stood. He was an older man, his face lined with decades of diplomatic experience. "Commander Chen, you say the question is simple, but I disagree. This is perhaps the most complex question humanity has ever faced." "I agree, Ambassador," Sarah replied. "That's why we're here." "Then let us examine the situation carefully," Liu said. "The architects believed that premature contact would destroy developing civilizations. Do we have any reason to doubt their assessment?" Dr. Osi rose from his seat. "We have every reason to doubt it, Ambassador. The architects failed. Their civilization collapsed. Their approach of protecting species through isolation clearly didn't work for everyone. Maybe it doesn't work at all. Or maybe, countered Representative Sarah Nakamura of Japan, their approach did work. Maybe the species they protected survived while others failed. We have no data. We're making decisions in the dark." Elena Vasquez stepped forward. She had barely left Antarctica in the 2 weeks since discovering the sphere. "We do have some data. The architects' recordings showed dozens of species they tried to help directly. All of those species failed. The ones they protected through isolation we don't know about. Maybe they're still out there. Maybe they're the ones thriving. Or maybe they're still isolated, still alone, still wondering if they're the only intelligent life in the universe," said General Marcus Okoye of the African Federation. "Is that what we want? To hide behind this ancient defense system like frightened children? Better frightened children than dead adults," someone called from the back of the chamber. Sarah raised her hand for silence. "There's more you need to know. We've established communication with the alien fleet waiting at the system edge. They've sent us a message. Dr. Osi, if you would." Osi activated a hologram. An alien face appeared above the chamber floor. It was Zalthran, similar to the images they had seen of the missing crew. The face was elegant, almost ethereal, with large eyes that seemed to hold both intelligence and sadness. "People of Earth," the Zalthran said, speaking through the translation system. "I am Admiral Kalros of the Zalthran Imperium. Our diplomats came to your world in peace. Your defense system destroyed them. We have lost friends, family, loved ones. We do not blame you. We understand now that you did not know about the Guardian, but we need you to understand something as well." The hologram changed, showing a vast expanse of space. Ships moved through it, thousands of them, but these ships were different. They were dark, angular, made of metal that seemed to absorb light. They moved in perfect formation like a swarm of insects. "This is the convergence," Kalros continued. "It is a machine consciousness created long ago by a species that no longer exists. It spreads across the galaxy, assimilating biological civilizations. It takes our technology, our knowledge, our very bodies, and converts them into more machines. We have been fleeing it for 2 centuries. Every year we lose more worlds, more people, more hope. The image showed planets being consumed, cities burning, ships fighting desperately against the dark swarm. Sarah felt her stomach clench. The convergence is coming to your region of space, Calross said. In perhaps 10 years, maybe 20, it will reach Sol System. When it does, your Guardian will not stop it. The Guardian only targets vessels attempting peaceful approach. The convergence does not approach peacefully. It simply attacks and consumes. You will face it alone with no allies, no support, no knowledge of how to fight it, and you will lose. The hologram returned to Calross's face. We came to offer friendship. We came to offer alliance. We came to share knowledge that might help all of us survive. Instead, your ancient defense system cast us away. Now we wait beyond your barrier, hoping you will choose to deactivate it. Hoping you will join the galactic community while there is still time. The choice is yours, but please choose quickly. Time is running short for all of us. The hologram faded. The council chamber erupted in voices, everyone trying to speak at once. Sarah let them argue for a few minutes before calling for order. This is the reality, she said. If we keep the Guardian active, we stay isolated. We have 5 years before it fails on its own. But in those 5 years, we learn nothing about the convergence. We make no allies. We prepare alone for a threat we don't understand. If we deactivate the Guardian, we open ourselves to contact. We can make allies. We can learn. But we also take responsibility for Earth's defense. We can't hide anymore. Ambassador Liu stood again. And what if the convergence is a lie? What if this is a trick to make us lower our defenses? Then we're in trouble either way, General Okoye said. If it's a lie and we deactivate the Guardian, we're vulnerable. If it's true and we keep the Guardian active, we're alone when it arrives. Either way, we're at risk. We could keep the Guardian active until it fails naturally, suggested Representative Nakamura. That gives us 5 more years of safety. 5 years of ignorance, Dr. Ose countered. 5 years where we learn nothing about the galaxy. 5 years where potential allies give up on us and move on. 5 years where the convergence gets closer and we remain unprepared. Marcus Webb, who had been silent until now, stood. Permission to speak, Commander. Sarah nodded. Webb was just a lieutenant, but he had been with her from the beginning. His voice deserved to be heard. I've been thinking about what the architect said, Webb began. They believed that species needed to develop alone without interference. They thought help would make us weak. But here's the thing. They were wrong about themselves. They failed because they isolated everyone. They prevented any kind of cooperation or alliance. They created a galaxy of lonely species, all developing alone, all facing threats alone. Maybe that's why they collapsed. Maybe that's why the convergence exists, because nobody worked together to stop it. He looked around the chamber. The architects made a choice for us 65 million years ago. They decided we needed isolation. But we're not the species they protected anymore. We've grown. We've changed. We've reached the stars on our own, just like they wanted. Now it's time for us to make our own choice. Not hide behind their decision. Not wait until the choice is made for us when the system fails. But choose actively what kind of species we want to be. Sarah felt a surge of pride in her young lieutenant. He had captured something important, something that had been bothering her since they discovered the Guardian. Lieutenant Webb is right, she said. This isn't about whether the architects were right or wrong. It's about what we decide. Do we choose isolation because we're afraid? Or do we choose contact because we're brave enough to face the risks? Brave or foolish? Liu asked quietly. How do we know the difference? We don't, Sarah admitted. That's what makes it a real choice. If we knew the right answer, it wouldn't be a choice at all. It would just be following instructions. The debate continued for hours. Some argued for keeping the Guardian active. Better to be safe, they said. Better to have 5 more years of peace. Others argued for deactivating it immediately. Better to face the galaxy on our terms, they said. Better to make allies while we still can. But as Sarah listened to the arguments, she realized something. The vote would be close. Maybe too close. Humanity was divided, genuinely unsure about which path to take. And in that division, she saw both humanity's weakness and its strength. They couldn't agree because both sides had valid points. Both sides were trying to protect humanity's future. They just disagreed about how to do it. When the vote finally came, it was exactly as close as Sarah had feared. 49% voted to keep the Guardian active. 48% voted to deactivate it immediately. 3% abstained, unable to choose. Ambassador Liu looked at the results with dismay. We're deadlocked. How do we move forward? Sarah took a deep breath. She had been thinking about this moment, preparing for it, dreading it. There might be a third option, she said quietly. Sarah stood in the cavern beneath Antarctica, looking at the sphere that had defended Earth for longer than humanity had existed. Her team surrounded her. Dr. Osei with his translation equipment, Lieutenant Webb with his tactical displays, Dr. Vasquez with her archaeological knowledge, and a dozen engineers who had spent the past week trying to understand architect technology. Are you sure about this? Osei asked. His voice echoed in the frozen chamber. No, Sarah admitted, but I'm sure that doing nothing isn't an option. The United Earth Council had debated for 3 more days after the deadlocked vote. Every hour the arguments grew more heated. Some nations threatened to take unilateral action. Others threatened to defend the Guardian by force if necessary. Humanity was on the verge of tearing itself apart over a decision made by aliens who had been dead for millions of years. So Sarah had made a choice. Not the choice the Council wanted. Not the choice anyone had proposed. But the only choice that made sense to her. We're not going to deactivate the Guardian, she had told the Council. And we're not going to leave it running as is. We're going to modify it. The reaction had been immediate and loud. Modify it? How? The architect's technology was barely understood. They could break it. They could make things worse. They could destroy Earth's only defense. But Sarah had been insistent. The Guardian makes decisions automatically. It removes any alien ship that approaches. It doesn't judge intent. It doesn't allow for peaceful contact. It just removes threats. What if we change that? What if we made it so humans decide what's a threat and what isn't? Now, standing before the sphere, she was about to find out if her plan would work. Dr. Vasquez placed her hand on the sphere's surface. The Keeper of Distant Gardens appeared again, its holographic form shimmering in the cold air. We want to modify the Guardian, Elena said. We need your help. Modification was anticipated, the Keeper replied. If you have reached this point, you have earned the right to reshape our gift. What changes do you wish to make? The Guardian removes all alien ships automatically, Sarah explained. We wanted to scan ships instead. We wanted to analyze their intent, their weapons, their purpose, and then we wanted to send that information to us. We'll decide which ships are allowed through and which aren't. The Keeper was silent for a moment. You wish to take responsibility for Earth's defense rather than hiding behind automation? Yes, Sarah said. This is dangerous. You could make mistakes. You could allow threats through. You could deny peaceful contact. The burden of judgment is heavy. We know, Sarah replied, but it's our burden to carry. The architects made our choices for us for 65 million years. It's time we made our own. The Keeper's form shifted, seeming to consider. Very well. The modification you request is possible, but understand the implications. The Guardian will become a tool rather than a shield. It will require constant human oversight. It will force you to judge each approaching vessel, to decide in moments whether to allow contact or deny it. You will bear the responsibility for every ship that enters Earth space, and for every ship you turn away. We understand, Sarah said. Then place your hands on the sphere, Commander, and think clearly about what you want it to become. Sarah stepped forward. She placed both hands on the sphere's surface. It was warm, despite the frozen cavern around it. She closed her eyes and thought about what she wanted. Not a weapon, not a blind defense system, but a threshold, a gateway that humanity controlled, a way to meet the galaxy on human terms. The sphere hummed. Energy flowed through Sarah's hands, up her arms, into her mind. She saw the Guardian's code, if code was even the right word. It was more like instructions written in pure thought. She saw how it scanned approaching ships, how it identified them as non-human, how it activated the removal protocol without hesitation or judgment. And she changed it. With help from the Keeper, with input from her team, she rewrote the ancient instructions. The Guardian would still scan approaching ships. It would still identify threats, but instead of acting automatically, it would send all information to human operators. Humans would make the final decision. Humans would bear the responsibility. The modification took 6 hours. When Sarah finally removed her hands from the sphere, she was exhausted. But it was done. The Guardian has been modified, the Keeper said. It will now serve as you wished. But remember, Commander Chen, the architects chose automation because judgment is difficult, Because decisions have consequences. Because protecting a world requires hard choices. You have taken that burden upon yourselves. I hope you choose wisely. The hologram faded for the final time. The sphere's humming changed pitch, and Sarah knew it was now waiting for human input, ready to serve rather than rule. 2 days later, Sarah stood in Luna Command once again. Before her, the holographic display showed 23 ships approaching from beyond the solar system. Zolthran ships, Admiral Kalros had explained. Refugee ships fleeing the convergence, carrying civilians, families, children, all hoping Earth would grant them sanctuary. The modified Guardians scanned them as they entered the defense zone. Data flooded into Luna Command. The ship's weapon systems were minimal, designed for defense only. Their crew manifests showed thousands of civilians, mostly non-combatants. Their stated purpose was to request asylum and offer information about the convergence in exchange. But they were still alien. Still unknown, still a risk. Sarah looked at the scan results. She thought about the architect's warning. She thought about the Heptari captain's words about the silence. She thought about humanity's history of making first contact. Not always peaceful, not always kind. Lieutenant Webb stood beside her. "Your call, Commander." Sarah took a deep breath. This was it. The first decision. The first time humanity would actively choose to allow or deny alien contact. Whatever she decided now would set a precedent. It would show the galaxy what kind of species humans were. Scan results show minimal threat, she said slowly. Intent appears peaceful. They're fleeing a genuine danger and requesting help. She paused, knowing that her next words would change everything. Grant them passage. The Zolthran fleet is cleared to enter Earth space. Webb input the command. The Guardian received it, analyzed it, and allowed the Zolthran ships to pass. For the first time in 65 million years, alien vessels approached Earth without being thrown across the galaxy. Sarah watched the 23 points of light move through the solar system, past Mars, past the asteroid belt, through the zone where so many ships had vanished. But this time they continued forward. This time humanity had chosen to allow them through. They're requesting communication, Webb said. Open a channel. Admiral Kalros's face appeared on the display. The alien's large eyes were wet, and Sarah realized it was crying. Commander Chen, your species has shown mercy. You have given us hope when we had almost lost it. Thank you. Thank you for trusting us. Thank you for giving us a chance. Don't thank me yet, Sarah said. We're trusting you because you asked for help, because you came in peace. But understand this, we're watching. We're learning. And if you prove that trust was misplaced, we have the ability to protect ourselves. We understand, Kalros said, and we respect your caution. We will prove ourselves worthy of your trust. This I promise. The communication ended. Sarah looked at her team. They were all thinking the same thing. This was real now. First contact wasn't a distant dream anymore. It was happening. Alien ships were approaching Earth, and they had been allowed through because humans had chosen to allow them through. Commander, Webb said quietly, we're receiving another signal from beyond the system. 3 more ships, Heptari class. They want to know if they can retrieve their dead from the ship we found. Scan them when they arrive, Sarah ordered. If they check out, grant them passage too. Over the next week, more ships came. Some were granted passage. Some were turned away, their scans showing weapons or intentions that Sarah judged too risky. Each decision was difficult. Each decision carried weight. But they were human decisions, made with human judgment, based on human values. The Zolthran refugees arrived at Earth and were given permission to establish a temporary settlement on Mars. They brought knowledge about the galaxy, about other species, about the convergence and how to fight it. They brought technology and science and art and culture from a civilization that had been traveling the stars for thousands of years, and they brought a warning. The convergence was real. It was coming. And Earth had perhaps 15 years to prepare. But now at least humanity wouldn't prepare alone. Now they had allies. They had teachers. They had friends from beyond the stars who could help them understand the dangers they faced. Dr. Ose stood beside Sarah, watching the first Zolthran shuttle land on Mars through the observation windows. Do you think we made the right choice? He asked. I don't know, Sarah admitted. Maybe in 50 years we'll look back and realize we should have stayed isolated. Maybe the architects were right. Maybe we're making the same mistakes they warned against. Or maybe, Ose said, we're finally growing up. making our own mistakes instead of avoiding the mistakes others made, taking responsibility for our future instead of hiding behind ancient defenses.